Great, so welcome everyone to Stronger Together panel. We have a great distinguished panel in front of us. We have Ambassador Arthur
Sinodinos
from Australia. We have Lieutenant Colonel Austin Hood, who's from part of the Pathfinder team at NORAD and NORTHCOM. We have Colonel Mathew Wenthe from the National Guard Bureau International Affairs Division. And we have Dr. Ahmad Khorchid from IDEAS in Canada. So just to get things started, I will have each of you talk for about 3 to 4 minutes, just to explain a little bit about what you guys are doing and a little bit on the international front as well. So I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thanks very much, Catherine, and thanks to South by Southwest, GovTech, VMware, DIU, all of you for being here. It's fantastic. My motives are entirely crass. I'm a former Minister for Industry, Innovation and Science in Australia. I really believe in the role of innovation and science in the community. And since about 2015, 2016, Australia has been upgrading its defence capability in a very significant way. That was cemented in our Defence Strategic Update in 2020. We're committed to, we're now spending more than 2% of GDP on defence. A large part of that is increasing our capability, and as part of that, promoting sovereign capabilities as well within Australia in various sectors. And we're also very keen to work better with allies and partners. One of our ambitions, that's why I say I'm quite crass, is for us in Australia to be recognised more clearly as part of the national technology industrial base in the way that Canada was in the past, in the way that both the UK and ourselves, as part of legislation that was passed here some years ago, was recognised. But there's still what you might describe a lot of controls and red tape around how that works in practice. And I think a lot of that actually potentially impedes the way we can work together to be more innovative, to draw on each other's strengths, where different countries, different sizes, often have complementary capabilities. So for us, it's not about saying we want to be part of this to have a free ride. We want to bring capabilities to the table and value add. The AUKUS agreement that we've just entered into is another opportunity trilaterally, Australia, UK and the US, to work together, both not only in the nuclear-powered submarine space, but importantly, from my Prime Minister's point of view, particularly importantly, in other advanced capabilities. We're looking at cyber, we're looking at quantum, we're looking at AI, machine learning, and other undersea warfare capabilities. And what we've done since AUKUS was announced in September is, apart from the work on subs, which is on its own pathway, we've been identifying specific projects to pursue under the rubric of advanced capabilities in those areas I described, and hopefully soon we'll be announcing what some of those projects are. I'm very excited about where that is headed, but I think, when I look at the innovation potential that's available across the ecosystem, not just here, US, UK, Canada, Australia, countries like this, and more broadly, reducing those barriers to working together, that interoperability, interchangeability, or whatever, is becoming more important. And the geostrategic circumstances in which we find ourselves today are making that increasingly important. The very fact that we're in a situation now where the decoupling that we're seeing with Russia, on top of what we're seeing with China. Now, with China, a lot of people said the decoupling was largely going to be around the internet, the splinternet, and all that sort of thing. But also we've seen around potential applications of critical and emerging technologies in the military space. There's quite a bit of decoupling going on there. But now what's happening with Russia is going to accelerate some reorientation of those supply chains. And it's about how we have a different mindset about how we work together. And the leadership the US has shown around the whole Russia-Ukraine thing is providing a bit of a paradigm shift for that. So very general, I'll leave it there, but happy to answer questions later.
Great. Austin.
Yeah. Hi, good morning. I'm Austin Hood. So Austin and Austin. But anyway, thanks for having me out here. And so I am the technical lead for the Pathfinder team out of NORAD and NORTHCOM. Our structure makes us unique. We have Canadian military embedded in our team. Our team chief, our lead, is our Army Signals Colonel. He pulls all of this together for us every day. And so what we do is we are trying to find new ways to get after the mission of defending the North American airspace and some of the other mission sets that NORAD has. In there, the way that we get about doing that is by leveraging cloud vendor agnostic technologies, bringing high innovation in, creating spaces for sharing information with our binational partners, and then also being able to have and leverage spaces for artificial intelligence and machine learning. And so we don't do this alone. I see out in the audience several of our friends that help us make this happen, other DoD agencies as well as industry. And also the DIU for being able to bring us into being able to have some of the skill sets and talents required to put together our data fabric. So one thing that's unique about what we do is that we are building an ecosystem. And so I've heard that word before, so if anybody's got their buzzword bingo card, you could put one on ecosystem. Probably innovation is center square, but in our case, we are doing, in earnest, making those capabilities and bringing them to bear in a scalable and modular fashion. So while our first use case happens to be an operational use case, a very here and now type mission set with fast twitch muscles, it's actually the benefit of the other communities that surround them and support them that bring the power for the ecosystem that we have. And so, for example, we're not just ingesting data, manipulating it, and presenting it to operational folks in the field, but we're also exposing that data to data scientist teams, for example, so that they can run deep heuristics and analytics and come up with observations to be able to help inform the mission set writ large on there, which is not something that we have today in a capability. And so by bringing all of that to bear, it makes it a very exciting area. We do have a reference architecture that we're building toward, but as you can imagine, there's probably a lot of question marks in some of those future and outlying areas that we put together. But I hope that with venues like this and working with partnerships like DIU and industry, that we'll be able to turn some of those question marks into exclamation marks and convert those ideas and thoughts into capability. So,
Great.
Yeah.
Colonel Wenthe.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Mathew Wenthe. I'm from the National Guard Bureau. On behalf of General Hokanson, I just want to thank VMware and DIU team for allowing us the opportunity to come here and talk about SPP, the State Partnership Program. I'm now realizing that I'm probably the least technically adept person on this panel, and Ahmad hasn't spoken yet. So I will speak more about partnerships and the program. I want to give you an idea of what that program is and how I think and my team thinks that maybe it could be leveraged to support kind of what is being discussed on a more technical level here. So I'll talk about what it is. I'll talk a little bit about why I think it can be leveraged, and then throw out briefly some ideas on how, and then maybe we can, further throughout the day or the panel, we could talk a little bit more about what that would look like. The SPP program, State Partnership Program, is actually an OSD program that my office manages on behalf of the Chief of the National Guard Bureau, General Hokanson, and the and OSD. It is a security cooperation, a Title X security cooperation program that pairs states, the National Guards of states, with the defense forces, and in many cases emergency or national security forces of other countries. Notably, though, we're with 85 countries now. We had 2 more this year. We're nominated, Oman and Cyprus, but have not been partnered yet. And it's been around for 30 years. Sadly, Australia and Canada are not yet state partners. Maybe that's something we can remedy after after later on today. But it's a broad range of partners, and I think I don't know if we didn't get the maps, but at 85 countries, and over 30 years, it started in 1993. It allows an incredible level of enduring personal level partnership often mill to mill in the beginning, but in many cases that had expanded out to whole of not just government, but whole of society and agency within these states. And so trying to figure out how can we leverage that to implement this kind of stronger together idea is kind of what we're trying to tackle right now. Understandably, or notably, it has not been a very tech-focused program, right? It's been very mill-to-mill training, key leader engagements, and familiarization visits. So we're trying now through events like this to leverage that access and partnership to boost some of the issues or facilitate some of the opportunities that are being discussed in this panel. Why we think that's important, and I think, obviously we take our guidance from the National Defense Strategy. And so in 2018, the National Defense Strategy clearly articulated a renewed importance for allies and partners. Then the guidance for development of allies and partners talked about defense trade modernization, which was kind of the light bulb for us to say, okay, how are we doing that? What is that, and how are we going to help do that with this special program that we have in the state partnership program? In the venture capital discussion last night, there was a couple things that I took away. One was someone had mentioned that we need to make it so that being entrepreneur, we have to highlight the fact that entrepreneurship can be patriotic, right? And I don't, you can unpack that a bunch of different ways, but I kind of took away the idea at the one level that, hey, by through our entrepreneurship, we can, come up with better solutions to technical problems. And that's one level of it, right? So partnering and this idea of partnering and becoming stronger to make better tech. But I think the next level, and where I think, kind of what the ambassador speaks to is at the next level, it's like not just the tech, but the partnering itself, right? And figuring out how do we build a better ecosystem. That one's already been taken, but how do we strengthen that ecosystem together, both within the United States and our commercial or industrial military complex, but then now take that out to the rest of the international community. Because as the ambassador highlighted, this separation and integration is really going to be kind of the key, the coin of the realm moving forward. So it's fairly nascent for us right now on how we're going to do this with SPPs, but some ideas, and I won't go into details, but just kind of give you the list. The ideas that we're looking at right now are, one, engaging more proactively in international trade shows and events like this, right? Which I think would be like, we don't do that with SPP. But let's make that something that we do. Go with our partners together to trade shows like FDI in Chile next month and around the world. The second piece is to another venture capitalist or someone on the panel yesterday mentioned the idea of they like to have the DoD curate companies for them. So how can we leverage this network that we have with international partners to curate problem sets and solution sets for the military industrial base? And then finally, really, Katherine, partnering with organizations like yours, we're looking to use SPP funding to be able to put positions with DIU or NSIN, and so make sure we're tied more closely here within our own ecosystem. So with that, I'll stop there, and I really look forward to kind of hearing some ideas from the panel and the rest of the group. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone, for having us here. I mean, I'll start off by saying thanks, DIU, for this fantastic opportunity. It's been 2 years that we've been stuck at home, so this is a great first event to be at, so I'm really happy to be here. It's funny, none of us really as panelists got together beforehand, but I like how a lot of what I'm about to say kind of resonates and almost instinctively picked up on a lot of the things that my fellow panelists have said. So my name is Ahmad Khorchid. I'm the Director of Innovation Integration within Defense Research and Development Canada. We are the research and development arm for the Department of National Defense. Around 4 years ago, in 2017, Canada launched its new defense policy, strong, secure, engaged, strong at home, secure in North America, and engaged in the world. The last two parts of it really speak to the need for international partnership. Our strongest relationship is with the US. Austin had picked up on the uniqueness of the NORAD and the binational command, and that is a very unique thing that we have. And on the engage in the world, well, that's with the Five Eye Allies and like-minded folk. The current events that we see happening in the world really underpins kind of what this policy was all about and the driver behind some of the key investments that policy wanted to make in innovation. Canada is a small country. Our expenditure on defense are really minute compared to the US investments. But in the policy, what was key in that policy was earmarking around $1.6 billion over 20 years for innovation investment, which is a huge amount of money for us to put forward and to kind of earmark for innovation work. The program that's running this is the program that I'm working for. It's called Innovation for Defense Excellence and Security Ideas. And the program really is based on three basic concepts. You need to foster innovation, you need to access innovation, and eventually deliver innovation to the men and women in uniform who need it. As a society, if we want to put our men and women in danger, we might as well equip them the best tools that they have to protect themselves. So fostering innovation, the buzzword comes in, the ecosystem piece. A lot of the investments that we're going to make in innovation might not necessarily come back to capability, but what it will really do is create a healthy ecosystem. I mean, I'll put my corporate mind on. In a lot of organizations, in society as a whole, we're going to see a big shift in the demographic. There's going to be a lot of people kind of moving into retirement. So we need to invest in an ecosystem to have the young talents of the future thinking with us, innovation and defense problems. So that fostering piece is going to be one of the most important kind of benefits that we're going to get from these investments. Access innovation. That's a really cornerstone of all the innovation work that I think all of the countries are doing, in the sense that historically we've always been very comfortable within the walls of our organizations to see a problem and to say, this is the solution that we want. We have never been very good at engaging other people in solving our problems. We've been very good at going out to industry to say, these are my requirements, give me the solution that I want. Not always the solution that I need. I'm really careful about the word, it's the solution that I want, right? So now the paradigm shift here is, well, let's change this and think about engaging everyone, thinkers out there, with our problem set. Break down the issues that we have from traditional operational capability deficiencies and big problem sets into challenges and problems and pain points that you can get other industry, academia as well for us, engage in solving those problems. We cover a wide breadth of investments, all the way from TRL1 to TRL9. Most of our investments right now, because we're really only starting year 4, have been in the 1 to 6. This last year or so, we've been able to get things into the 7, 8, and really put them in the hands of operators to test them. We're leveraging the current conflict that's coming on to kind of test some of those things that we've developed. You know, and I think the men and women in uniform really appreciate having access to things that are not really polished and complete, because they get to harden them and work with them and shape how they happen. So that's really going to be a key way moving forward for us, is to figure out how we're going to kind of build that ecosystem and move everything down this innovation funnel, that we're able to hand off solutions to our colleagues in uniform. In concept, it's a fantastic thing. I mean, nobody can argue about this. We talked about this together as a panel before. There are challenges. We have challenges. I think all of us have common challenges around that last bit of moving it over into the realm of a hardened technology that can be acquired. I can speak to our Canadian experience. We've done really, really well in the R&D side, getting things matured that way. The challenges we have is doing that last bit of work, that last piece of transition handover. I am looking forward to be very selfish these few days by picking everyone's brains around, how do you guys make it work? What can we learn? What are the key cultural changes we have to think? And if one piece that I will walk away from the couple of days that I have here is, and I think you alluded to some of this already, around the rethinking that when we work with industry and innovations in general, it should be a partnership. There should be that kind of, it should not be a relationship of they are providing me contract or a commodity that I'm buying. We're actually partners in developing a solution. And switching that modality of being very focused on a risk-averse acquisition culture that we're going to buy capabilities, to say we are partners in developing solutions. That will take some time. And with that comes a lot of international partnership as well. I think I can speak to it that one of the biggest things that we're putting forward in front of our cabinet coming soon is work together on with NORAD, Northcom on the defense of North America. A big chunk of that is actually earmarking money for co-developing the NEST technologies with the U.S. on the defense of North America. I think that's a big thing. We're actually putting it as we're not going to be doing R&D separately. We're actually going to be looking at co-development of solutions, putting special things that allow us to work with U.S. companies. I think the barriers for us is not the innovative capacity of the ecosystem or the will of the people or the need. It's figuring out how we can work around some of the regulations, the policies, the normal barriers that exist in a culture that existed in an industrial era, where now it has to move really fast in the digital age to be very adapt and agile and responsive. And to that means reduce all the red tape and get more comfortable co-developing and failing fast all the time. And I'll leave it at that and we'll open up. Thanks.
I have some questions just to kind of get the conversation going. So, Colonel Wenthe, one of the things you talked about was some of the state partners that the National Guard has established. California is partnered with Ukraine, and I think that's on top of the mind for a lot of people right now. Can you talk a little bit more about some of those state partnerships and what that means for the department and some of the reactions that we've been able to enact?
Obviously, with any crisis comes opportunity, and this is what's happening right now in Europe and the Ukrainian crisis has really presented some paradigm shifts, or at least challenged us and UCOM to look at how do we leverage SPP and what is the state partnership programs. And there's kind of two elements to that. One, California and the relationships that at both the senior leader level that the TAG of California, Major General Baldwin, has with the both military and ministerial leadership within the Ukraine. That goes back 20 years. You know, he grew up with some of those. You know, with some of the, he was captains together with some of the senior leaders in the Ukraine, and they've grown up through that partnership. He is able to leverage that relationship, those informal relationships, right now to just to primarily be there for them. And that's quite frankly the messaging out of California right now is we just need to let them know that we're tracking and we're helping and doing what we can just to really just if nothing else for morale. And so that's really important. I think what we're seeing too is that the Department of Defense understands in ways that maybe we've never been forced to do previously. The TAG of California is I don't know if daily, but is speaking routinely with General Milley and being asked, hey, what are your thoughts on this? What do you know? To the point, like here's someone who has 20 years working with them and knows maybe what their a little bit better inherent understanding of maybe their problem set. So there's a lot intangibly there, but it's very powerful. The second piece to that is, SPP, it's peacetime, okay? And it's kind of hard to define where we are right now from a military phase 0, phase 1, crisis to conflict type spectrum in Europe right now. But there was initially this idea with all the other state partners, hey, we need to kind of slow things down. This is, we're not in SPP world anymore. And in fact, after a day or two in conversations with UCOM, we found that that's actually not the case. If we need to keep doing we don't know where the situation is going to go. And so maintaining and keeping, in fact, leaning into the partnerships that we have with Poland, the Baltics, Bulgaria, the Balkans. Now more than ever, we need to make sure we're there for them to be ready for what may happen next and to help them with the crises that they're seeing, humanitarian and otherwise, in their own countries.
Austin, one of the things you talked about was this Pathfinder project. From my understanding, it started off as just a United States project, but this is something that's now being applied towards a joint, I would say, problem set, for both Canada and the United States. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yes, I certainly can. And so when you have to make a commitment to Pathfind, normally there aren't an abundance of resources to go do that. And so starting out with a small team of 4 Air Force officers in a joint command, naturally we want to go do things in the air. And so after getting a few thoughts in order, examining the NORAD and Northcom mission set, we found some extremely relevant areas to improve upon, and those led us to our binational relationship under the NORAD umbrella mission set with Canada. More so, we have 4 pillars in NORAD and NORTHCOM that we aim to satisfy as we build and go down this journey with our nation mission partners. And so the first of those is a domain awareness, being able to see things that are out there. And my leadership has mentioned many times that a lot of the threats that come and challenge our way of life here in North America don't start in North America, they start somewhere else. And so having an awareness of those 5 joint domain areas is key to be able to see and understand and know what's going out there. The second pillar that we are building on for this concept is information dominance. And so now that you're able to see what's out there, now you have to put the so what to it. What does it mean? How do we put it in context? What makes it relevant? And so if we have a shared domain awareness with Canada and our national airspace, as in our first example, now we have to make sense of what that means. And so what does normal look like? What does abnormal look like? And how do we get after those elements of it? And so once we have those 2 pieces locked in, then we moved into a decision superiority pillar. And so now it's what are you going to do about it? And so getting decision makers supported at the right level to be able to bring this capability to bear and take action against items is what is the strength of where all of those come in. And we certainly can't do that alone, especially with the mission sets that we have through NORAD. And then finally, we cap it all off with global integration. So global integration is that thing that ties everything together. So there isn't an event that happens regionally in our globe that doesn't have global impact. And so our commander at NORAD and NORTHCOM has devised our global information dominance experiment. And so these are different than exercises. Exercises you're normally resourced for. They're normally kind of scripted, and then you're graded on how well you do with it. Experiments are a whole different animal, and so they give you license to dream big. They give you license to bring in leading edge technology, not in the hope that everything works, but in the hope that some of it works, and that we have leave behind capability for that. And certainly nobody has the good idea market cornered, and so we have to work with other countries and other corporations and organizations to be able to bring that to bear. So hopefully that answers your question a little bit.
And then for both the ambassador and Dr. Khorchid, one of the things is we have a number of companies in the audience, and the U.S. market, they understand, but how can they help contribute to some of the common challenges that we all face, but for both Canada and Australia?
I mean, the panel said it. I mean, the problem sets that we have are very common. I think it's fair to say that the partnership between Canada and the U.S. along that border is one that is a partnership in trade, security, and really a lot of common goals in society and globally. How we can make this happen? I think we got to get better at building bridges, getting people together. I know that for the last couple of years, we've put a bit of a pause on some of the things that we used to do, which is kind of the face-to-face, these venues of having people come to collaborate. One of the things that we're trying to do under my program is to start establishing a bit of a focused strategy about how we can do international partnership. We've had chats with colleagues in Australia around how we can co-define common problem sets and then co-engage our innovation ecosystems to these ones. And then by so doing, companies, the private sector is good at building bridges. We prevent them with common problem sets. We don't have good mechanisms to channel money across borders yet, but it doesn't have to be that way because if we can have an ecosystem where the problem sets being addressed by different partners are the same ones, done through our own national boundaries, companies, the private sector doesn't believe in boundaries. They will go beyond that and they will make the bridges and the links that we need. We have a perfect example on a project that we had done for one of our intelligence commands. A company had done this. We took that same problem, put it out of the NATO. The NATO hub has challenges. We put the same challenge out there with the NATO hub. We got an American company that won that challenge. And companies are good at linking with each other. So we got them doing those linkages. And now that project that we had now grew into kind of 3 companies working together. We maybe as governments not be very good at doing that deliberate integration at that front. We will have barriers within our systems that do it. But if we're able to present common problem set and bring that space where we're able to allow there to be a space where our different thinkers, innovators, have a space to come together somehow to make those linkages, I think that will really bring on dividends and be a huge multiplier effect. One of the nice things that I've seen out of that work is that these 3 companies that came together from 3 different countries, each one of them had an expertise in one thing, but the combined effect when they bridge the 3 capabilities together, integrate that into something, is fantastic. The value added to the operators is exponentially higher than if just looking at the problem set from what they were doing. So I think that's one way of doing it. I don't think there's a silver bullet how we can do this. We still have a long way to mature. My program that I'm running is only 4 years old. I've been in the job for 2 years. So I think we're kind of in this forming stage still. How we get into normalizing how we do business is going to be the question now is, what have we learned? What is working? What's not working? We have to be comfortable taking risks, really. Governments in general, we're not comfortable with risk-taking. We tend to build everything that we do around a risk parameter that is based on policies, litigation, etc. But allowing us to take more risk through the innovation ecosystem will help build that. And really learning from what we're doing right now and build more bridges. I know that we're trying to do something similar with the UK to launch common challenges. I know that hopefully we'll build better relationship on some of the innovation ecosystem between us. I know that there's a lot of good work is happening through NORAD and some of that space. So it's not a silver bullet. It's a whole bunch of experimentation across, and that will pay dividends over time. And if we allow the private sector, universities, and our ecosystems to kind of cross-pollinate, I think that will bring dividends in the future.
Yeah, Ahmad, I'd like to pile on there with you as well. And so, as a combatant commander, we don't have all the authorities and resources that we need to do what we need also. So recognizing that some of that capability comes from other nations as well as other organizations is vital to us moving forward in that area. And so there may be things where as a pathfinding organization, we need to be leading in areas, but we don't need to be leading in all areas. And that's where we depend on those strengths and that diversity amongst all of us to be able to capitalize and gain and fold that into a much more synergistic effect as we have things go through. And so, for example, one of the ways of saying what we are is also saying what we're not. And so Pathfinder is not a software factory. However, we work with software factories, and we also work with software developers. So our friends over here on the right from Platform One help us to do what we do in a secure manner. And that takes that area of thought off of our plate for a good part of it. And that means that we can now focus on getting after other elements of a much broader challenge, like data strategies and how we're going to work in a classified, releasable environment with our nation partners. And so these are truly large and difficult problems to solve, but as we partner with individuals and organizations that bring things to the table, we can capitalize off of them and advance much faster than we can if we just try to do it alone. And so from our approach, we give ourselves 0 points for originality, right? So we don't want to be the one that came up with it. We want to be the one that took it and put it to work in a production capability.
I think that's a good point, because often I found in my experience, governments want to build from within. There's this not invented here syndrome, whereas sometimes there are off-the-shelf solutions out there that can actually do the job. They don't have to be white elephants. They can actually just be, they can be very simple, straightforward, but they get the job done. And so one of the challenges in our system is getting that mindset shift to be able to accept that that is the case. Part of it does come down to security and other considerations, but we can come across that. My advice to companies that want to do business in Australia is, first and foremost, to actually get down there and have a look around. I think they'll find the ecosystem is more built out than maybe they expected. Because of the spending that's now going on in the defence realm, a lot of opportunities are coming up. One of the challenges has been in the past that you don't get into trouble for buying IBM. That seems to be the theory often. And so there's been a bit of a sense that the primes should get the major contracts rather than smaller companies. We're now taking action to try and tilt the playing field a bit more the other way, where possible. The government's identified through its blueprint of critical and emerging technologies areas where we want access to the latest technologies and where government is actually funding development of those technologies. Quantum is an example of that. There's a lot of government funding going into the quantum space, and that's happening all around the world, and it's a huge competition. But we are putting a lot into that space. So if you're in that space in the US, also think about the opportunities in Australia, because there will also be government funding there potentially as we set up commercialization hubs and other things. And there's an opportunity to potentially partner with projects under the AUKUS banner, as I mentioned before, but also more broadly under the Department of Defence funding that's going on. We also have a couple of funds for next generation technologies and in the innovation space to try and sort of encourage companies that are thinking in innovative space. And that shouldn't be off limits necessarily to foreign companies. If they're based in Australia, they can also look at how they take advantage of that. I think the important thing, and this is the really difficult bit, and I talked about this before, this idea of being allowed to fail fast, learn from it, and move on. In the public sector, always very hard because you're dealing with public money, all these other accountabilities. That's the bit I'm not sure we've quite cracked, but what I find is when there's a crisis, and we saw this with the pandemic as well, and I think we're going to see this with some of the unfolding events, is often you find ways to get things done more quickly because there's an urgency. For example, at the moment, the way the US is turning around requests for equipment and whatever to do with what's happening in Russia and Ukraine, that's happening so quickly compared to the process you might have in what are described as more normal times. And we saw this with the way vaccines were developed during the pandemic, with Operation Warp Speed and the rest. You can really cut down the times needed to get decisions, get regulatory approvals and whatever, and that's the methodology we're trying to find a way to replicate as we go forward in the defence sector. The other point I would make is the DIU model, the In-Q-Tel model, where you go out there and you try and find companies that have technologies, whatever they're relevant to problem sets or things that you've identified as an issue, is, I think, a good model. We have In-Q-Tel in Australia. They're operating there, and that's a great way for Australian companies to get exposure to the intelligence community here or whatever. So there's a lot going on, but I just feel like often if from the top, right, the people at the top, then there's a champion somewhere, whether it's a minister or a general or someone who says, we are going to do this. If that happens, the system response, the tone is set at the top. That can be as important as whatever policies and structures you put in place.
Yeah, Ambassador, I'd like to also comment about, at the wrench turning level where I sit, we do have a phenomenal top-down direction, and through our command and our leadership training. But we also find that culture is one of those things that contributes to resistance to adopting It also contributes to teams talking past each other as they're trying to solve common problems. And so the cultural aspect of it and steps we've taken in Norad and Northcom to level the playing field, to have everyone have a digital citizenry, digital literacy type of competency to them, so that as these elements come around to help them do things better, it's not such a culture shock when it shows up on your door. So as somebody who's trying to take a lot of ideas and put them into play, it's great that I can build the shiniest, best whatever in virtual space, but if nobody wants to use it, it's not a win. And so having to bridge multiple cultural sets, not only within the agency and governments and departments, but also externally with our cultures, because not every country has the same outlook on, as you know, as with respect to how things go forward and what pace they go forward in. And then they also bring cultural areas where they are culturally anchored, and that's not a bad term. It's just they have that perspective and they bring it with them. And so we see that at our level, we go through, and so having a common culture of innovation is great, but it's not the only elements of culture that I feel not change for that.
Theme that I've heard kind of throughout is there's innovation and there's technology. That's just one small part of the innovation ecosystem. Culture, policy, standard practice is going to also need to be moving forward, because we're going to have to look at things from a different perspective. As we're looking forward to deepening some of these ties, and really not just going from across our different department silos, but now starting to work much closer with allies and partners. Now you're potentially dealing with language and a separate culture, not just programmers and policy folks. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that and where you guys think about, as for international engagement going forward, some of the things that are going to need to change.
Getting to know each other. I think that's going to be a big one. A couple of weeks ago, my team put together this international workshop about lessons learned from international innovation programs. The idea was simple. I mean, we had been doing this for 3 years at the time when we started thinking about this. One of the key questions that we kept having was, so how are other countries doing this? How can we get better understanding what works, what doesn't work, what are the common problems? We did this over 3 days. We had organizations from the US, from the UK, Australia, Norway, Sweden. One of the things that we've learned is that when we talk to each other, the problems that we have are a lot more common than we think they are. When we talk to each other, there are things that we possibly had not considered that are working well, that require that consideration. And I think it helped us kind of understand that it's important to do innovation. It's important to focus locally, but the problem sets are global, and to figure out how we can learn from each other, not just on the technology space, but also on how we do this to enable this to happen, is going to be really key moving forward. I'll pick up something the ambassador said. I think one of the things that I know in our program, what we see is the international aspect of it comes in with the big primes. The big primes are very comfortable having top all around the world, and they're able to work through the normal barriers that exist around local government content requirements for investment, right? But the big primes, I think we can all agree, are not going to be the engines that are going to drive change forward. What really drives them is a very different cultural and set of purpose than what drives innovation from the small company. I'm going to put my nerd Apple hat on here for a second. One of the things I always like to kind of think what Steve Jobs' approach to this was like. And one of the things that I think about is Apple is a really successful firm. Apple is not your typical IT firm. Apple is focused on design, it doesn't have to be the latest technology, but it has to be the most useful solution to do things that way. Where Apple has focused and how it's been successful is that the decision making in its space is one that it never accepted that it has a monopoly on a marketplace. The big primes seem to have a monopoly on the marketplace. What drives what drives companies and organizations in a thinking of monopoly is not ingenuity and the next best thing that's going to happen to keep you technologically advanced. It's not the technology driver. When you have a marketplace, inventing the next better solution is not going to drive you to increase your market. You already have the marketplace. What's really going to drive the decision making and the thinking is the marketing folks, the people who kind of lead the market share discussion, not the R&D discussion. So that's what I think that we have to be cognizant of, that the big primes that we normally work in the defense industry are not going to be the generators of the next new ideas or solutions. It's going to be the smaller ones, smaller companies. They are inherently at a disadvantage because they will not have access to the global market. They are inherently at a disadvantage because they will not have a lot of the capital to burn to actually go on some of these ventures on their own. How we as governments, as people, how we can put that mindset and think how we can enable them to, one, be competitive and to be able to actually access global markets company that way is going to be the challenge. I know that almost most countries who have these innovation programs, it's a focused way of generating the local economy, that piece, right? So there are drivers that way that are important, that have their value in there. But beyond that is when we're looking at global problems in the security and defense world, the solutions will have to be global, right? The applications of them will have to be global. How we establish an ecosystem that allows for that levels up playing field, is going to be one that we have to challenge ourselves constantly to think through and to deliberately think about, because it is easy to set up your system, to set up the process, and just accept that's what's coming, right? But to be deliberate about the thinking that the next big thing is not going to come from the big thing right now, is what we have to be focused on. It's a challenge for us, I have to admit. It's one that we think about how we can do this. I would also say that a lot of countries as well think that way as well. It's the same challenge that they have, is leveling that playing field, giving them access. I know there's a lot of programs out there, right? There's a lot of government programs that are supporting small, medium enterprises. But how we actually think about even that support to those companies as an ecosystem that is seamless for them is where we need to get better. Even beyond the international barriers that those enterprises have to kind of cut across, they also have to kind of cut across a whole bunch of internal and national barriers on the different programming, right? So how they channel between one to the next seamlessly is one that we have to challenge ourselves as public service, as public sector folks, about how we can do this better, because they are going to be our partners for innovation for the future. They're going to be our partners for not just for the defense agenda, but also for the knowledge-based economy of the future that we want to bring. And so we need to challenge ourselves better to think about how we can create an ecosystem that is seamless. We need to make their access to support be as opaque as possible on the back end and be provided with what they need at the front end as much as possible. So I don't think any of us have gotten it right. The dialogue that we had a couple of weeks ago helped us crystallize some what we see as opportunities that other countries are doing. I've come to this venue wholeheartedly thinking that I need to kind of rub shoulders with people, ask them what's working for you, what's not working, what's not, and come back and learn from that and implement and experiment with it. It will not work. It might not work, but I think there is a higher price of inaction and not trying than trying and failing. I think that's what we got to be careful about.
Katherine, you talked about the culture piece, and I heard you ask, okay, so there's the organizational culture piece that we discussed around innovation, but then this, the capital C culture and language and things like that, which is which is something clearly from an SPP standpoint, and that partnership, these 30 years of partnership helps break through that, right? So you can, from a company, from a business standpoint, if you're looking to engage a market, this is where we're ideating. How can SPP and the partnerships and relationships and the cultural understanding, and in many cases language ability that exists through those partnerships, how can that be leveraged to help companies or agencies with emerging tech engage and kind of boost that engagement with and an introduction to break through some of those cultural barriers. The other culture piece, and your Apple example kind of resonated with me in the sense that there is truly a kind of Apple, Samsung, VHS beta type choice that is going on when it comes to military tech. And when you look at the conversations that I've been in, and the key leader engagements that I've been able to sit in on with chiefs of defense from Eastern European countries, and there is and it's not just European, it's African, it's India, who gets a majority of their equipment is Russian sourced equipment. There's this true VHS beta decision on do I go, how am I going to build the foundation of our military technology? And there was one chief of defense who said something very, Eastern European, so it's kind of this big, East West. Where are you facing right now? And he said something that was pretty interesting. Yeah, as the chief of defense, he can set policy and he can direct. He can control everything. He said the only thing he cannot control, though, is the minds of his men and what they like, right? Whether they're Apple or they're Samsung, right? And he said he credited the SPP in the fact that his team had been training with a state National Guard with U.S. equipment for so many years that they have basically converted to the Western and are fully leaning West. And it's not because he's telling them to do it; it's because that's what they want, and it won't change. So that culture, and that it's pretty compelling. I think speaks to kind of, it's such a decentralized program in SPP, and we just have a program management role. But if we can harness that and grow it across these partnerships and across the ecosystem, it's pretty compelling, and that's what we're trying to figure out how to get our hands around.
It sounds quite organic.
It is.
And allows for a lot more experimentation and really to tailor to those specific relationships. I didn't know if you guys had any.
Just very quickly, at a macro level, we're trying to get up in Indo-Pacific a digital trade agreement. And the reason for that is to create more common standards around digital in that space. US, like-minded countries in the region, including Australia, Japan, Singapore, others will come in based on some of the bilateral agreements. And my point is this: setting standards is important. And if we set standards that we're all part of, it actually makes some of what we're doing easier because we're all, in a sense, on the same platform. And so I think that's something that's important when we're thinking about how we work better together. How do we make sure our standards in many of these areas, and in the Quad context, we're seeking to set standards around some of these critical and emerging technologies we just talked about, whether it's AI, machine learning, or cyber, or quantum, etc. You can go through the list, and that work is ongoing. So don't forget the role of standards in helping to create, if you like, a common language. The other point about a digital trade agreement, particularly in the Asian region, helps to push back against digital authoritarianism, because by default in the region, center of gravity will be China because of its size, and if their hardware and software becomes the default in all of these spaces, we know the potential implications of that. So I'll leave it there.
Sounds good. From the conversation, it's really about the allied innovation base and really harnessing all different aspects of it, whether it's from learning from the best practices of different allies or being able to harness really cutting edge technology coming from Australia, as well as building out that partnership of once we've been able to leverage the innovation, then adopt it and actually apply it in some real world scenarios or the common problem sets that we're all dealing with, and then building that out to some of the for our broader for our overall global context and environment. We are getting down to the last 5 minutes, so if you guys had any last comments that you guys wanted to say we can kind of go down the line.
Well, just very quickly, from my perspective, for companies in the audience, we're happy to try and connect you with relevant people in Australia to look at what the opportunities are. As I said before, there's a wide array of things now happening in the defence space in Australia, but more broadly as well. And we're keen to tap the expertise of companies. We're also keen to get Australian companies exposure to the US market. And there are a number of mechanisms that you've talked about with DIU and others that help us do that. But more broadly, the mechanisms we're talking about, trilateral mechanisms like AUKUS and others, from our perspective, they're sort of Trojan horses to help break down some of the access to the national technology industrial base. And I think that's how some senior people in the US system see it as well. So we think there's good prospects of doing that. As I said before, these are my motives. They're crass. Some of them are commercial. Some of them are sort of national. But ultimately, it's to help build out this innovation ecosystem that we're all talking about, because I think going forward, no one country among like-minded partners can do it by itself. We can work together, and there are lots of complementary capabilities.
Yeah, I'm going to take a cue from the ambassador, and I'm going to be crass as well. And so we all have common problems that we're trying to solve, and some of us have solved them. And so where I sit, I am looking for and shopping around for technologies, approaches, and ideas for very tough problems out at NORAD and Northcom. So what I would urge you to do is make yourself known to the DIU community so that we can consolidate and have very productive discussions and meaningful connections as we bring things together in defense of our nation.
I'll be crass too. I guess my motivation is I'm going to make a shameless plug for our State Partnership Program Conference, which will be next month, April 5th through 7th in Denver at the Marriott Denver Tech Center. In line with what I've been talking about this year, will be actually it's the first time we've really done it in this format. But and then also what's really special is we're going to do we'll have a concurrent trade show there. So if any companies are interested in coming to display there, that advertisement is advertised on sam.gov. You can sign up. And then we're having working groups that are for each combatant command, because that's fairly standard. But then we're doing ones for space, cyber, illegal fishing, right? Which is kind of interesting, but something new that surprise I certainly didn't realize, but and I don't want to get into it obviously, but such an amazing and critical issue right now that goes across the entire global landscape, just protecting our country's protein sources, and then finally defense trade modernization. And Colonel Goldberg, who goes by Stoichi, who many of you know from DIU, will be running that working group, and I'm hoping to see a lot of the same faces there for that. So and help us kind of ideate a little deeper on how this SPP can be the LinkedIn for what you guys are trying to accomplish, build network. Thank you.
Crass is the flavor of the day, I guess we might as well continue. From my perspective, I think I'd encourage any of the companies, innovators here who want to know what we're doing, what we've been doing, go on our website, ideas. We try to post all the challenges, all the companies that had kind of got into our funnel. I mean, we begin with a lot of investments that we funnel down to one or two. Make connections that way. There'll be more challenges coming up in the future. Hopefully more contests. So no, go check it out. See if there's opportunities where some of those challenges, areas that you're working on that would resonate. Look at the Canadian companies that had worked on those domains with us. See if there's opportunities for synergies and a multiplier effect on bringing some of the thinking together. I think we can't force this as government, but we can make the platforms available for innovators to come together. We're trying to do more of that through our trade shows. We're going to be having a special innovation exhibit for successful companies that we thought have been really, really good during our CanSec trade show. So hopefully some of you guys will get a chance to see that as well. I see the flashing light telling us we got to get going.
Yeah, that's pretty aggressive.
For such a robust discussion today, we really covered a lot of ground, and really look forward to really building our relationships further going forward, because truly we're stronger together. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Fantastic. I mean, thank you, Catherine, for leading these distinguished gentlemen through conversation. And I love the fact you're like 20 seconds and almost done. That's perfect. So we have a few Q&A moments. So while you're thinking about some questions here, I took some really quick, I thought really powerful antidotes from your conversation. What we are is knowing what we are not. Really powerful. Really love that. Can control the minds of his people, which really means that the standards, I think we took that. The pillars equal strength. Standards equal better together. Really, really strong, powerful things that I'm hoping everyone's taken out of here. There's another one here I love. With any crisis becomes opportunity. Isn't that innovation? Isn't that the moment that we're all here to try to understand what software and innovation does for us? So thank you. Really, really great data point. Questions? I think there's a few gentlemen walking around with a microphone or two. Just raise your hand. We'll bring you a mic. Whoa, wait. What? We got some in the front, way over in the corner. Brad, can you have that gentleman there?
So this may get me kicked out, but so you talk a lot about innovation. You can do that. You say you kick me out. You talk about a lot of innovation, wanting innovators, but what are you doing, or how do you encourage leaders to protect innovators? Because a lot of people want innovation and want people to innovate, but they're often disruptors. I mean, I have a freaking mohawk, and it doesn't go well most of the time. So what are you doing, or how are you encouraging other leaders to help protect those people that are trying to do those kinds of things?
Yeah, I'll start out with that and build on a little bit of what I've said earlier about the NORAD and NORTHCOM culture. And so having a commitment from the top down is key and essential for that to happen. But also having a bottom-up movement is absolutely necessary as well. And so to be safe, and so the area where I work, I'm actually not within the headquarters building by design. And so I'm put out in a space that makes it easy to get to industry. It also allows me the freedom to be able to have frank and open discussions with industry partners about maybe some unpopular topics as you go through looking at decision and trade spaces for there. But within the staff and the command that we have out here at large, they know that it's sponsored and encouraged by top-down leadership. But normally what happens is it's in the middle level when you look to your cubicle to the left and right of you where you start to meet the most pressure about being innovative. And so some of those pressures come down into job security, like, hey, I heard this new thing is coming by. Yeah, but I don't want to do that because it might impact my job. And so envisioning themselves in a new role would be helpful in that area. But our command has a climate that has put some of those assurances in place and said it's okay to take risk. In fact, we encourage it in areas, right? It's not like we're just going to go carte blanche, take risk everywhere, because we have a very serious charge for us. But in a very controlled and deliberate way, we can do that. It is, we are combating a risk-averse culture within our department, and so that's another area where it's okay and to have that message set out there to take risk and to fail forward, like Ahmad, my good friend Ahmad of 12 Hours has said over there. So hopefully that's a partial answer for that, but I don't want to let anybody else from the panel chime in if they'd like to.
Well, that risk piece is so big. We've got to do a better job of how we measure risk and the disconnect between the risk we are willing to accept, personally and for our folks in combat, physical risk, and then on the flip side, the lack of risk, just complete risk aversion to taking any type of bureaucratic or policy risk is, I think, pretty substantive and something we need to figure out. And you see it at the top. You see goodness at the top. I was in a room with General Mattis and a 06 Marine asked him, "Hey, sir, you're in this when he was the actually he had just retired and was not yet the Secretary of Defense, and he said, "Hey, you're in this room full of future leaders. What's the number one piece of advice you give them?" And without even hesitating, he said, "Protect your renegade." He said, "Protect," just like you. He said, "Protect the people that need protection, so we can get where we're going to be." And I think it's still going to take a couple of years. We're seeing the culture at the bottom, the right culture at the top, and it's just going to take a couple of years for that to filter up. And I'm excited for that. I hope I'm around long enough to see it.
Can I just briefly add? Partly it is sponsorship from the top saying this is okay to do, this is the right thing to do, but also having programs which explicitly recognize a bit like a safe harbor for disruption, that actually are saying that this is the direction we're going and this is what we want. My final point is that disruptors do not need permission. They disrupt. And often then what happens is the system has to respond. Suddenly they're faced with something that if they don't do it or don't adopt it, they fear others will, or they fear they're going to miss out on a capability they should have. So sometimes the disrupting sells itself. It's just got a dynamic of its own. Yes, there can be program managers and others who can stand in the way of doing things, but disruptors, when they come along, they actually shake the whole system up, and the system is forced to look at this because it's something new. They have to have it because if they don't have it, others may have it. So all power to disrupt.
That's great. I love that comment. I think there's a question up here, maybe in the front row. There you go. Oh, I'm sorry. Go for it.
Hi, Jessica Larson from Army Applications Laboratory. Our area is focused on small businesses and non-traditionals, getting them into the Army. We work a lot with small business innovation research projects. But I have kind of a two-part question. So from the Army side, or I guess the DoD side in general, is we talk to hundreds, if not thousands, of small businesses or non-traditionals looking to get their technology into the Army, but we don't have a great platform to be able to store this information and share it with everybody. It's mostly word of mouth, and we're trying to get better at that. But if we can't even do that within the Army, how do we communicate this with across multi-nations, so that way everybody's understanding the kind of technology we have available? And then from the flip side is, how does the innovators know what problems we're working on? If we have 10, 15 different platforms, they have to go search hours and hours and hours to find these problems that we're trying to solve. So both parts, if you have any comments on that.
I have some thoughts for you, Jess. And so, because we have a very similar problem as you. And so the first thing that we do with our approach is we start with the end in mind. So I mentioned that reference architecture a little bit when we started. And so rather than facing a problem that's so large, like boiling the ocean, that, hey, we can acknowledge that that's maybe the end state, but let's start with something that we can bite off and manage. And so by having that end in mind, and in our case, having a reference architecture, we're able to break down the elements of that task and now have conversations with organizations, individuals that say, here's what I'm talking about in a global reference. And so that often helps to be able to triage, if you will, the many types of solutions that might be out there that are seeking a mission set in our case. And so oftentimes we have mission sets that go unfilled until we find a match and a pair for that. But being organized in that way for us has paid dividends and continues to as we work with other folks, because we can very specifically say, this is what I'm looking for and this is how it fits into my bigger piece. We can also time phase those to say, yes, that is a problem and I do need it fixed, but I have another one that I have to work first because I understand that there's going to be linkage between those pieces of art. So to the other part of your question, how are we getting after that when we come through? Well, in our service, in our reference architecture is a service catalog. And so in there are a list of the cloud services and things that we are piecing together that we know we're going to that we either have or that we are going to need in there. So while it's kind of rudimentary in that you can just scan through a list of items, but when you have around 10,000 services in your catalog, it seems like there's a place in there for about everyone to be able to contribute. So now you have a different problem, a great problem, which is having all of that help in managing it. So rather than being frustrated by the breakdown and being able to approach and be approached by those, effectively managing them and putting them to play in the right order for your mission needs is what helps us work through problems.
Just to add is the Army Applications Lab, DIU, Ensign, we're all part of the same team, the Department of Defense. I think there could be a lot more collaboration or information sharing, so we're not having to do separate data sets. Could we all combine, leverage each one's advantage? So we're all talking, we're all able to share information, but then create a front door, if you will. So for a company, it's not I have to reach out to 80 different DoD innovation organizations. I can reach out and the information gets shared so that the Army is able to leverage it, the Air Force is able to leverage it, DIU is able to leverage it. And for that, especially on the international side, it's really understanding the problem sets of our allies and partners. What common problems are they facing, and what solutions are we developing to those problems, and can we share that across? They're likely also going after those same problems, and they might have better solutions. Well, great. I want that because I want our warfighters having the best solutions so that they're able to meet their mission. But that's just some thoughts on my end.
I think we have one more question that we're going to try to keep us on
So
time.
Jeff Clack, I'm the Director of Cyber and Telecommunications at the Defense Innovation Unit. So this is focused at Colonel Wenthe. So first of all, a huge compliment to General Hokanson and the National Guard Bureau on what they're doing with the state partnership program. This is a hidden gem. I'm almost sorry that everyone gets to see it in some ways because we discovered that program some time back and have been taking advantage of it. Of course, the folks in California are very tied with Ukraine. We're in partnership with the National Guard in California and working with them for quite some time to implement what they're doing now in helping Ukraine. I just wonder how much the infrastructure understands how important that program is, whether they're now funneling money through it so that program can be enhanced. Because I would love to see that happen. It's a great program, needs to be supported. How can we support it more?
Well, I appreciate the question, and I've been looking at this program for almost 2 years now, and it is very complex the way it's set up, and it's really just been cobbled together over. It is a great example of something that, without really any clear intent of where it was going to go, has turned into, quite frankly, a national treasure over 30 years. But with that comes, from a program management standpoint, when asked questions like that, I often say, well, do you want to take the red pill or the blue pill? How far in do you want to go on SEP? But the answer to your question is actually just last week, well, two things. One, the present budget got signed yesterday, which is great because there's basically double our current budget in congressional ads in there. So hugely supportive from Congress. Congress recognizes what it does and the fact that it has been underfunded over time. The other thing that has happened last week is that OSD P&R completed a comprehensive review, which was directed out of an OSD issue paper, out of policy that came out 2 years. And right now it's going through CORD, but the result is a recommendation to fully fund the program to account for the growth, and then also really to kind of boost it up to a level that is commensurate with doing what these ideas that we have and leveraging it across a broader ecosystem. So we're not there yet, but it seems like finally all the right agencies are coming together to get this program. Everyone talks 2.0, 3.0, but we're finally at the point where I think it's going to go into 3.0. And that's why I want to have these conversations now so we can be ready to really execute that with industry and with the rest of the DoD when we're ready to do so.
That's great. Thank you so much. Katherine, thank you. Thanks to DIU, the global partner ecosystem that you all support is fantastic. And thank you, gentlemen, helping the world make the world a safer place, quite frankly.
Thank you.
Thank you once again. Thanks.